Greetings and welcome to Legacies of Wavryn, Lore of the Endelment. This will be chapter 45 of this reading. For about 10 minutes, Father and I clashed blades between each other wildly as we moved nearly all over the city, scarring up bits of the streets and buildings. We were able to get a few hits on one another, but it wasn't much. Either we'd slice a piece of each other's clothing, or we'd make a light cut on the other's body, not much of a wound. Most of my cuts from Dominic were either on my legs or arms, whereas I cut up his torso, front and back. At one point, we began to move faster and teleported back into Central Park. We seemed to be standing in place in the very center, while ripping apart small portions of the ground around us. We had started to move so fast that time for us nearly stopped, with one bright flash of lightning covering us and the rain standing still in the air. It took a while, to our minds, before we clashed one last time and just pushed against each other viciously. Once we did, the rain around us fell as one big puddle of water, and the lightning went away, shortly followed by a very loud burst of thunder. Though I knew the humans watching the fight hated us, they cheered for us to continue, hoping that we might kill each other at the same time. Father and I pushed against each other for a few seconds, then Amber and Jewel, in their enhanced Endelment forms, jolted over and kicked Dominic in the face. Amber struck with her right foot, as Jewel struck with her left, throwing Father about 20 feet back from me. I just watched as the Half-Bloods did their double team against the Kexan, which I found funny. As Father tried to stand up, Joey and Nanale in their Endelment forms jolted over and began rapidly punching and kicking at Father's sides. I enjoyed that. After multiple rapid hits, they struck Dominic hard one last time into the stomach, Joey with his right fist and Nanale with her left. They then jumped back a couple feet and waited for him to recover, just so that they could continue beating him up. While Father leaned over, staring down at the ground, he said, "Impossible. How could you weaklings have this much power?" Nanale jolted towards Dominic and jumped to swing a left spin kick with her right foot, striking the back of his head. She used her impact to hop away, while Father hit the ground with immense force. Then the Alicant stood up and yelled, "How's that for a weakling, punk?" Father tried to stand again, but JJ teleported to him and said, "My turn." JJ raised his right fist and punched down on the top of Dominic's forehead just as he tried to look up, forcing the Kexan to kneel on his right knee. Before Father could move to recover from that attack, JJ did a backflip and kicked Dominic in the face with his right foot, tossing Father up into the air about 50 feet. As the Ancient moved to land on his feet, he charged a simple yet powerful energy blast into his right hand and tossed it towards Father, where it ignited on impact and threw the Kexan into a building. JJ jumped up to hover near where he tossed our enemy and called out, "Only one man has ever defeated me in combat, Dominion." The Ancient then readied both hands for the Zenbai Kyo technique as he continued, "And that man ain't you." The Ancient sent out his attack, yet Father quickly regained his focus and swung Ricard down from his left to slice and negate the blast's power. He then jolted for the Ancient and swung diagonally upwards across the torso. JJ avoided the attack, then tried to swing his right fist at Father's head. Dominic ducked and swung his weapon back at the same time, striking the Ancient's lower torso hard with the blunt backside of the sword. Father tossed his opponent aside, yet the Ancient regained his stance and tried throwing a few more energy blasts. Dominic swung his weapon and sliced each attack, negating them as he moved back a few feet with each swing. After the fifth motion, he tried jolting for the Ancient, but was intercepted by both Serena and Nanye. Only the Ibeki was in her shimmering dual-colored Endelment form, her black fur shining electric purple, while her white shined electric blue. But my wife still had enough power and strength to match with the servant's attack. They jolted up and spun once to roundhouse kick the sides of Dominic's head, Serena with her right into Father's right side, and Nanya with her left. My wife jolted down to where she knew she could intercept again, while the Ibeki quickly spun once more to strike downward with her right foot. Her attack threw the man back towards the ground, where Serena was waiting to strike him. However, Father regained himself and first countered to slam into my wife and shove her away and into the ground. Then he easily landed on his feet as he turned to ready against Nanya. The Ibeki jolted down to continue her battle, yet with one swift movement, Father used Rakar and countered her attack. He stabbed her through the center of her torso, then charged a powerful blast of energy into his right hand and motioned it at her as if for a punch. Father struck Nanya in the face and ripped her off the blackened blade, where she slammed into the ground about 15 feet away. After that, he moved to hold Rakar backhanded in his left hand and bolted over, ready to stab her once more. Wolf and Fox, both in their Endelment forms, jolted over and stopped the Kexon before he could near the Ibeki. Wolf had kicked up with her left foot into the left side of Father's stomach, while Fox punched the right side of his head with her right fist, both ending up stunning him for a moment. The strike got Father to release Rakar from his grip, the blade missing the Ibeki on the ground and landing at her right side. Wolf spun around from her right and kicked Father in the back left side of his lower torso with her right foot, sending the Kexon about 20 feet away. Before he could hit the ground, Fox jolted over and back kicked with her right foot to toss him back into the center of the park. I tried to slash at Father with one powerful swing, but he dodged it and was able to flip over me and kick the back of my head with his left foot, sending me over to where Wolf and Nanya were. Yet even with his attack, Father still slammed into the ground, where he and I stood back up and turned to face one another. Everyone else stood too, facing Dominic, as we all readied ourselves once more against him. I kicked up Rakar to try and hold it in my left hand, yet Dominic quickly called the dark weapon into his left hand, where he swung it down at his left side, holding it forwards. Father laughed, then glanced around at us and yelled, "It doesn't matter how many Endelments you have, you still won't have enough power to kill me." "Man," Wolf said, "I knew he was tough, but this is ridiculous." I changed my stance by swinging Rakar up, as if to place it on my back, yet still held onto it, as I said, "Tell me about it." Father glanced around at everyone as he shouted, "Is this all you've got? I had expected better." The Kexon was completely unaffected by what we had done. Most of his wounds had healed, and he stood as if he hadn't even lost a single breath of air. Though I know we hadn't actually used our full potential, we were still shocked that he wasn't even scratched from the multiple beatings we gave him. Father turned to me as he lowered his voice and continued, "However, I will admit those two humans did quite well to my surprise, but they'll never surpass me. Not in a million years." He then motioned to charge a key slash and said, "Now it's my turn." I glanced over at Wolf and smirked as I signaled with an imperceptible wink with my right eye. She turned her head and noticed me, nodded slightly, then we turned back and stood confident against Father as we waited for his attack. Father raised Rakar up and swung down to slam the blade into the ground, releasing multiple translucent emerald key slashes towards us. Wolf raised her right hand up at them, using her power to form one large translucent pink barrier that completely shielded us from the attack. When the strikes passed, Wolf let her barrier disappear, then Serena and I jolted towards Father for an assault. However, neither one of us could get a hit in on him, but neither could he on us. A few more minutes into our fight, Father finally got a strike in and kicked Serena away, but I countered by stabbing him through his stomach with half of Rakar's blade. However, Dominic quickly spun Rakar in front of him to strike Rakar's blade and forced it out from his left side, then went to punch me with his right fist. He struck with enough force to send me into the ground in front of Wolf's feet. Then Fox and Nanye jolted over to attack Father. However, they were thwarted off as well with one swing of Rakar. Almost immediately, JJ teleported behind Father to hold the man's arms up and away. Then both Joey and Nanle jolted over, started rapidly beating Father as hard as they could with their punches and kicks. After a few seconds, Amber and Jewel joined in, and all five began striking around Father as hard and as fast as they could. Yet shortly afterwards, Akexon released a shockwave of energy from his body that pushed everyone aside while he yelled, "Back off!" Dominic used a second shockwave to toss those around him farther away, yet Wolf and Fox jumped in and used their double team against Father, fighting much fiercer than before. Yet even with that, the man was able to defend himself against them. It was like he wasn't even trying. It took a while, but the two Alicans finally struck Father in the face at the same time with one of their fists each, throwing him into the ground about 25 feet away. That's when Nanye and I jolted over and first kicked him up. Then I swung Rakar like a bat into Father's torso, so the Becky kicked with her left foot into his face, where we tossed him even farther away. Dominic tried to stand, but I switched my grip with Rakar into my left hand and raised my right to charge an energy blast. As I released it, I called out, "Bogaro!" The attack struck the entire front side of Father's body, pushing him back until he was ground into the dirt, buried near one of the edges in the park. We all stood panting and waited for a moment, finding the bastard was still able to stand up, as if unaffected from what we had done. Dominic laughed sinisterly as he faced us, then said, "How much longer is this going to take? Because I'm starting to get bored." "I don't get it," I said. "Nothing we throw at him seems to work." Just then, Fox angrily jolted at Father and tried to strike him any way she could. But with each strike, he was unscathed as he stood completely still. After a few hits, Father punched the Alicans in the stomach with his right fist to stun her, then grabbed the back of her head with his right hand and readied for a stab. Before Dominic could motion into his attack, Nanye jolted over and kicked the right side of the man's head with her left foot, only enough to bend his neck slightly. As Nanye dropped from her attack and stood about 3 feet away, Father released Fox to let her fall onto the ground unconscious. Then straight punched the Becky in the face with his right fist and threw her far aside. He then used his right hand to snap his head and neck back into place, while lowering Rakar at his left side. Father stood up straight as he looked over at the rest of us in anger and said, "If that's all you idiots can do." He kicked Fox away with his left foot, then continued, "Then it's already over for you." Dominic moved to hold Rakar backhanded again and bent his knees slightly as he spread his feet apart about 3 feet. Then moved his right hand in front of himself as he aimed his palm up and bent his fingers in slightly, making it seem as though he was holding something. In his position, Father began concentrating a large amount of his energy as his aura began to flare off his body. Shortly after that, he stood up and pulled his right hand back to his side and clenched it into a fist, while giving a short shout to the sky. He changed into the simple darkness form, and his aura went from emerald to black, with the ground rumbling for a few seconds. In this state, Father used Dark Vanish and struck everyone, except me, hard enough in their chests to paralyze them. He then vanished over to me to calmly stand about 5 feet away. Staring with a smirk on his face and speaking in a two-tone voice, Father said, "Now that they're out of the way, let's have some fun of our own." Acting as if what happened didn't faze me, I said, "Very well then." Though I stood still, I changed into Shattuck and also shook the ground as a light shockwave burst from my body. The wave barely swayed both my hair and Father's. Then I quickly tossed Rakar like a dart, aiming for Rakar. Dominic tried to swing to block the attack, but the dark weapon slipped out of his hand just as the two swords struck. It sent both weapons far away from us and at opposite ends of the park, where the blades stabbed into the ground halfway. Dominic looked at his hand, surprised. Then as he looked back up at me in anger, I spoke in my two-tone voice and said, "Let's go, D-minion. Time for an old-fashioned butt-whooping." Father just gave a smirk at that and responded, "Very well then, Endelment." We both moved into the vanish technique to halt time only between us, where we immediately jolted towards one another and began rapidly striking at each other. Every now and then, one of us would get a small hit in, but the fight mostly consisted of us either blocking the other one's attacks or dodging them. Though time had stopped for us, the fight felt as though it lasted for about 10 minutes. Then, with one powerful clash of our right fists, we cancelled out the vanish technique and stood pushing against one another about 30 feet from the ground in the center of the park. Of course, when the humans saw that, they had no idea of what just happened. And even though my friends couldn't see it either, they knew what aspired. Father pulled his right fist away and tried to kick me with his left foot, but I countered it by using my right hand to swiftly brace myself up onto his leg. In the same motion, I flipped myself over to stand behind Dominic and struck my elbow hard into his back, breaking his spine at the center. He fell to the ground and struggled to motion himself back up, while I turned to face him and lowered myself to the ground to stand about 8 feet away. It took a moment, but Father was able to get himself onto his feet as he turned to face me, then painfully snapped his spine back in order. Afterwards, he said, "Amazing. Even though both our powers came from Lord Zaec, you, my son, are just slightly stronger and faster than me." "Sure thing," I bluntly said. Dominic looked at me, confused, and said, "Something doesn't add up. How can you be stronger and faster than me, or fighting at the same level?" I gave a light smile and replied, "Maybe you're just stupid." "Real funny, Rayakin." With my evil grin, I said, "You really want to know, Halen? Unlike everyone else, I gained my powers from taking Shadow's soul and fusing it with my own, which works in my favor because it gives me a bit more power to some of my dark attributes." Father laughed at that, leaning forward as he grabbed his stomach with both of his arms, and as he calmed down and stood up, he said, "What kind of bullshit are you talking about? No mortal can fuse the soul of a god with their own." I raised my right hand up to my heart and said, "Then explain this." I pulled Shadow's soul out from my own and held it out for Father to see, simultaneously changing into Zaec. Father had a slight bit of fear in his expression as he said, "Inconceivable. But that can't be. That's not how the legend goes." He then became angry again as he yelled, "Who are you? What are you?" With a blank expression, I placed Shadow's soul back into me, and as I lowered my hand, I spoke with my new two-tone voice and replied, "I was once Zaec, a vicious and evil being of darkness, born from the deepest depths of abyss. Yet with the darkness tossed aside, I stand reformed as Zaec, pure-hearted being to bring peace to life, though I will still end yours, Halen. It doesn't matter what you're called or what you can do. You'll fail all the same." Father tried to use the Dark Vanish technique to strike me with his fists, yet with each swing, I would just avoid it with ease as I stood calmly in my position. After a few tries, he stopped attacking me and moved out of the Vanish technique, motioning to stand about 4 feet away from me, panting slightly. "Impossible," he said. "Nothing can be faster than Dark Vanish. How can you even possibly be equal to me?" "Simple," I replied. "Though you can use the Vanish technique to alter time itself once, I can alter it any other time after that in either my Illume or Bliss forms. Therefore, I can make it seem as though I'm faster than you. But really, I just changed your power's abilities to open a window of time for myself. I can even negate and shut you out of the vanish technique. That's ridiculous. How can you tell when I'm going to strike you if I've already vanished? Moron. I raised my right hand up to point at my head as I said, my eyes can see the energy output just before ignition, while my ears can hear the energy frequency the dark vanish technique gives off. With that, it's just simple manipulation of my powers to alter it. So no matter what, I can keep you in check. When I lowered my hand, Father said, impressive. But still, that only means you can counter that particular move. He then opened his right hand, started to charge his dark energy into a very powerful blast as he continued, but I'm afraid your eyes and ears won't help you with this. To insult the Kexan further, I turned away as I crossed my arms over my chest and said, whatever. If you're going to be that ignorant, then I might as well not even bother with you. How dare you turn your back on me, Rayakin! Father swung his right hand out at me to fire what I sensed was a Zenkai blast, while he shouted, die! Just before the attack could hit me, one of my tails vanished, and a large translucent white wall appeared to block it. Once it deflected the strike, both abilities disappeared. Then I turned to have my right side towards Father, so I looked over at him and said, you done yet? Now I'm starting to get bored. Father pulled his right hand back, charging yet another blast into his hand. He yelled, then why don't you actually fight me, you coward? I teleported behind him as I looked over my left shoulder and replied, okay then. Before Father could motion from his left to face me, I quickly turned from my right and kicked him in the back of his head with my right foot. A strong amount of force threw him towards a huge crowd of people along the outer edge of the park, while also breaking away his charge of energy for his attack. However, I intercepted him before he could hit anything else and struck him in the forehead with my left knee. Afterwards, I quickly punched with my right fist into his face and tossed him back into the park. As he flew back, I teleported to where I knew he would crash into the ground, then waited as I watched him slam headfirst into the dirt. While he struggled to stand back up, I looked down at Father and waited until he was up on his feet. He then moved to swing a punch at me with his left fist, but I countered by punching him with my right fist into his stomach to stun him. Shortly after that, I spun around from my right to kick Father with my right foot into the left side of his torso, which spun him to face away from me, as I asked, what's the matter? Dominic tried to turn back towards me for another attack, but I quickly raised my right fist to punch him in the left side of his face, forcing him to completely turn away from me. I aimed my right hand up at his upper torso and charged for a quick yet powerful blast, which he only got a glimpse of before I fired the attack at him. The strike threw Father straight into a building across the park. Then I moved my right hand to cover my mouth a bit as I yawned. Afterwards, I crossed my arms over my chest and said, you know, I thought you wanted a fight. I then shrugged my shoulders and continued, guess I was wrong. Serena watched in awe of how well I could fend against Dominic by myself, now that we were on new levels of power, while she said, amazing. He might just win this fight after all. I sighed when I heard my wife say that, because I knew no matter what would happen, both Father and I were going down. But I wasn't going to let him proceed with what he was doing. I glanced at my wife, then turned back to where Dominic was and quietly said, I'm very sorry, Serena. After a few seconds of waiting for the man to show his face again, I thought, something's wrong. It shouldn't have been so easy to fend that bastard off like that. Even with the powers of a loom, or even with my greatest of powers, it should have been a challenge. I heard Father's sinister laugh, then in his normal yet darker voice he said, Round 2. Before I could even think to counter anything Father might use, the ground rumbled again, and I felt a small electrical current run past my feet. Quickly turned to try and warn my allies, but they had already been hit by the powerful and dark voltage, forcing them to fall onto the ground unconscious. However, since I was in my Illum form, I was unaffected by the attack and could only sense its presence. I turned back to find Father was standing right in front of me in his abyss form, still unharmed by what I had done. "Surprise," he said. I suddenly felt an extreme amount of pain in my chest, as if someone had struck me with a boulder going 200 miles per hour. From the impact of the attack, I took 3 steps back from Dominic and placed my right hand up at my chest where I felt the pain. Gasping for air, my body struggled to both understand what happened and how to recover from it. As I started to breathe heavily, Father sarcastically said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Was that punch too much for you to handle, Zaec?" I looked up at him in anger as he shrugged his shoulders and continued, "Sorry? Guess I don't know my own strength. Hope that you'll still fight after experiencing that." I chuckled after recovering from the strike, then said, "About time you started acting serious." I moved to channel my energy in my body again to change into my abyss form, so I gave a quick shout, which not only changed my hair color to pitch black, it also changed the color of my clothes to black as well, my wings being the only thing white. Speaking in my normal yet vicious voice, I asked, "You ready for this?" Father laughed, then replied, "Sure, go ahead and bring it." In a split second, our fight continued, with it now even more fearsome than ever. It was almost like the fight between Koju and Kalita, 2 of the most powerful beings slugging it out. With the full power of Abyss in our hands, we fought as equals. Our attacks clashing here and there were brutal. While our strikes nearly reached the speed of light, we fought all over the city. We nearly killed a few spectators in the process. About 20 more minutes into the fight, we ended up in the center of Times Square, where we were getting ready to strike each other in the face one more time. However, a bolt of lightning struck in between Father and I. We both reacted by jumping back about 6 feet just before the bolt hit the ground. The lightning was Earth, trying to speak to us again. But as stubborn as Father and I were, we weren't about to comply with its wishes then and there. We had to end our fight with one or the other dead, maybe both. Father glanced up for some reason, then looked back down at me as I effortlessly changed into my bliss form, my hair and clothes going to white with only my wings changing to black. He was confused for a moment, yet ignored what powers I could possibly possess in my new state, and the 2 of us began running towards each other. We pulled our right fists back and swung as hard as we could, clashing our fists with such power that it cracked a sonic boom. Shockwave ruptured the ground within a 25-foot radius of the impact, while pushing anything not anchored to the ground far from the area. While we pushed our fists against each other's, Father became very angry and said, "No, no, it's not possible. How can my son, my own damn son, be equal to me in power?" The 2 of us pushed away and spun from our right sides to kick against each other's left foot, creating a smaller shockwave that was only powerful enough to rattle the ground slightly. After the kick, we slid back to face one another again. As we stood, Father said, "Not even Eyeless was as strong as you are now. How can you be even more powerful than him?" "Because," I calmly replied, "Eyeless only trained himself to be just barely weaker than you, which was stupid. I trained to be stronger. So, I have." "Shut your damn mouth!" In his rage, Father pulled his left hand back and charged a very large amount of dark energy into it. Before he could motion to fire the blast, I swung my right arm in the same movement, with my right wing stretching outward. black feathers broke away and spun at my side, my left wing still attached to my back, while father went to strike with another Zenkai technique. My left wing bent around and shielded me from the attack with ease, then flapped out as I swung my right arm to call the feathers that had parted to attack Dominic. They first swung past him as he tried shielding himself with his arms, the feathers still cutting his body up slightly. Then they bolted up to start shooting down at him rapidly. My attack sliced father severely, but wasn't able to kill him. However, with how strong he was, it also didn't slow him down. My feathers reverted back and formed my right wing again as both bent inward, while father tried once more for another blast of energy. I jolted over and leaned down slightly to do a straight punch into his stomach as hard as I could, stopping his attack before he could completely conjure it. Upon impact with my fist to his gut, I yelled, "Wide open!" The attack paralyzed father and completely broke away his guard. Then I quickly pulled my fist away to charge a blast of my own and fired it at his chest, swinging my hand in the motion of a punch. The blast threw Dominic back about 15 feet, parting away a crowd of people that were watching and making him bounce a couple times off the pavement. He motioned to stand up, but was quickly tripped by Joey from his left as Nanale drop kicked him in the chest with her right foot, slamming father into the pavement. However, once the Donoviches stood to face father after their attack, two random Kexans came out from the crowd of people and started fighting my friends one-on-one. A few seconds into their brawl, father stood up and aimed his hands at the two Kexans to pull them away with his powers, while he yelled, "Back off! They're mine!" Afterwards, he jolted towards Joey and rammed my friend with his right shoulder to toss and slam him into the ground next to me. Father then teleported over to Nanale and kicked her in the face with his left foot, also throwing her over to me. I quickly moved to grab Nanale to keep her from hitting the ground, then helped her stand with me and Joey as we readied for another go at father. Dominic laughed, then said, "I don't know what you idiots hope to achieve, but there's no way you can overpower me. Especially since I've got my entire empire here to bring forth my reign of power to these worthless mortals called humans." I squinted my eyes and said, "You speak of them as if you were a god, Halen." "Precisely, Rayakin." With that, half of the people around us moved into a fighting stance against us. Some were Hadrogas and Alikans, but most were Kexans, all of which were still within father's empire. An entire army surrounded Nanale, Joey, and I within a matter of seconds, without a single hint of them ever being nearby before. As father's legion of idiots got ready to fight, Joey became cowardice, why else, yet said, "Don't think that just because you have more people to fight against us with means you'll win this fight, Dominic." Father laughed at that, knowing the man was no threat to him, then said, "What makes you think I need these weaklings to beat you morons? I've got more than enough power than you and all of your friends combined." "Ha!" Nanale confidently said. "I seriously doubt that." Father grew very angry as he stared down the cat Alikans and viciously said, "I'll show you, slave." Dominic jolted over to us and tried to kick Nanale in the face with his left foot, but she dodged him by leaning back slightly. She also grabbed his ankle with her right hand, throwing him over her and into the pavement. However, before he could hit the ground, Father swung his hands out to brace himself and used his motion to throw the Alikans with his leg as he swung it over to kick me. Moved my upper body in the same direction of his kick and ducked down to dodge the strike, while Nanale flipped around to land on her feet from being thrown from father. Joey jumped over me and tried to drop kick father with his left foot, but missed by an inch and ended up behind him. Before father could move to strike at any of us again, Nanale, Joey, and I shifted into another motion to attack the man at the same time. We moved to stand in a triangular form around Dominic, Nanale at his front left side, as Joey stood at his back left and me simply at his right side. Joey motioned to spin kick Father in the head with his left foot as Nonale went to punch his chest with her right fist, while I kicked Father in the stomach with my right foot. However, even with our combined attacks, Dominic blocked them all at once with ease. He used the back of his left fist against Joey, his left foot to halt Nonale, and the outer side of his right forearm placed down to stop me. I gave a light smile as I chuckled, then said, "Very nice," and then quickly made my expression go blank and continued, "But that's not going to help you for very long, Halen." "As with you, Zaec," Father responded. Before Nonale, Joey, or I could do anything, Father used his body to channel a powerful electrical current through it to shock us. Yet we were able to escape being struck and jumped back about 5 feet, where we stood against the man as he moved to stand up straight to face me. Once our eyes met, Dominic said, "By my calculations, from the position I sense between the planets and the time we spent fighting, the birth year shall come soon. So unless you can channel the power to defeat me within the next 4 hours, this entire planet will fall under my rule." Father then raised his hands up slightly and aimed his palms to the sky as he placed his arms out from his sides slightly, while he continued, "Once the two planets collide, they'll form a new world, one that I will rule over, called Halen, a world fit for a true god." My friends and I laughed. Then I said, "You're no god, retard. And what's with you going to name the new world by your middle name?" "What an idiot," Nonale said. Everyone, except Father and his followers, started laughing at what we had realized. But after a few seconds, Dominic became very angry, and his aura began to flare off his body with several black bolts of lightning jolting around him. As his aura flared, Father bent his head back slightly and placed his fists at his sides and shouted, "Enough!" Everyone stopped laughing as he moved his head forward to look back over at me and yelled, "By the time the birth year comes around, the two planets shall collide, and all those who stood before me will be eradicated from existence." Father then raised his right hand to point at me as he continued, "Including you, Endelment." Immediately after Dominic spoke, everyone except Nonale, Joey, and I gasped in fear, finding that not only was an impossibly powerful mythical being in existence, but Father did not care for any of them. Afterwards, they began to gossip what might happen, while Father raised his hands slightly to the sky and looked up at the storm clouds above. "Soon," he said, "the new world, Halen, will form, and I alone shall rule over it, so that I can reign supreme as a god." Father then lowered his arms as he looked back down at me and said, "Now then, Endelment, let us continue. Just try and stop me." In response, oddly enough, Joey said, "Very well then, Dominion." The fake Alicans went to attack Father, while I raised my hands up towards my friend and yelled, "Joey, no!" However, I couldn't stop him. My friend reached Father to throw a punch with his right fist, only to fail as Father used the vanish technique just long enough to move slightly closer to him, so he could counter with a punch in the stomach, stopping Joey dead in his tracks and knocking him unconscious. Right as my friend fell to the pavement, Nonale jolted at Father as she said, "My turn." "Damn it, Nonale!" I yelled, but it didn't stop her either. Before Father could get a chance to strike Nonale, I teleported over to him and shoved the Alicans back as I tried to kick the right side of his head with my left foot. Yet Dominic just grabbed my left ankle with his right hand and halted me. He gave an evil grin. He raised and pulled me over his left side, where he swung me back over to his right side and let go, throwing me into several buildings. The last building I crashed through led me back to Central Park, where I slammed into Nanye on accident and we both fell to the ground. I then moved to sit up next to Becky, her lying unconscious at my right side, and I heard Nanale give out a loud meow of pain. Shortly after that, she was thrown through the same building that I crashed through. However, once she broke out into the park, I noticed she had changed into her full animal form, while she hit Wolf hard and both went unconscious as well. In the same motion, Nanale bounced a few times on the ground and slid backwards to lay on her right side, apart from the Wolf Elicans. Fox glanced to where Wolf was knocked out, then turned to the hole in the building and yelled, "You bastard!" Fox Elicans charged a large amount of energy into both of her hands for a powerful attack, but before she could move to use it, a pitch-black surge of dark energy broke through the building and was shot straight at her. The surge was slightly bigger than the Elicans, and it flew with just enough force to push her back about 20 feet, bury her into the ground before igniting, yet she survived with almost little to no strength. Father started walking out from the hole that the blast created in the buildings as he gave a sinister laugh, gripping Joey's neck tightly with his left hand as he dragged the man across the ground. When Dominic stepped out from the building, he stood at the edge of the sidewalk and said, "Well now, since you know my so-proclaimed evil scheme, what makes you think that I'll let you live to stop me now?" I stood up to move back into my fighting stance as I said, "So you're still holding back on us?" He grew an even bigger grin. Then I said, "That's not very honorable for a fight." "What makes you think that I care?" he barked as he tossed Joey aside. "You are all going to die by my hands today, whether I played fair or not." My allies tried attacking Father with everything they had, yet he just batted them away with ease. His abyss powers were so great that not even my bliss abilities could match him, let alone defeat him. I stood watching Father thwart off my allies, while Amber got batted over to me. She stood up, terrified about the situation, and said, "Dude, this is insane. We can't beat him." "Shut up, Amber," I barked. "We've been going full force and we haven't even scratched him. There's no way we'll win." I raised my voice a bit as I barked, "Shut up, Amber." The half-blood moved to my right side and grabbed my right shoulder with her left hand as she said, "Forget it, man, just leave. There's nothing more we can do for this world." Just as the woman said that, I grew very angry and grabbed her shirt with my right hand to pull her closer to me, my hatred breaking me out of my bliss state. When I grabbed her, I turned to look straight into the half-blood's eyes with a very mean gaze and yelled, "Shut the fuck up!" I then lowered my voice and viciously said, "I have not once in my entire life ever thought about running away from a fight, and I'm sure as hell not going to do so now. So on that note, you can just bite me. I have never lost a fight in all my days out in combat, and I'm sure as hell not going to lose this one. So again..." I pulled Amber slightly over to my left side, then quickly swung her back over to my right to toss her aside into Jewel, who safely caught her sister, as I yelled, "Bite me!" I turned to face Father as he finally got my friends down, either knocking them out or damaging them to the point where they couldn't fight back. I became completely blinded by hatred and rage and said, "Not going to lose. I'm not going to lose." Father laughed, then he crossed his arms over his chest and said, "You've already lost, Endelment. You and all your friends have lost." Just then, everything went quiet, and I heard a familiar voice that said, "No, Ray, you haven't lost this fight yet." It was Grandpa. But I didn't understand why or how. When I realized who was speaking to me, Grandpa's voice started to fade away as my ears could once again listen to the sounds that surrounded me, while Grandpa continued, "Don't give up, Ray. Don't give in." I leaned my head back a bit to look up at the sky and shouted, I'm not going to lose to you! I roared at the clouds as my mixed blood red and dark gray aura burst from me and flared wildly from my body about 2 feet, while several large strips of lightning swarmed around me. Along with that, the ground began to rumble and grew to an earthquake that brought down a couple of the small buildings nearby. As the ground started to rattle, Father took a step back in fear with his right foot, confused watching me, as he said, "What's going on? What is this? Power? It's nothing like I've seen before. Nothing like I've ever sensed. No. Impossible. It can't be. You can't be." I gave one more shout as I raised my fists over my head, then quickly swung them down to my sides and bent my knees slightly while looking down at the ground, my body taking its form into its enraged Endelment state. My clothes changed back to their normal color, along with my hair and fur, as my eyes shined brightly with my aura. Though I had used my true powers before, with the way they had made me now, they were going to be far more devastating. The entire city rumbled, as if about to be crushed underneath its own weight because of my energy level pressure. Once I had changed into my more powerful state, I stood up straight and looked over at Father, who was trying his best to stand his ground in fear as I gazed at him furiously. Absolutely shocked, Dominic said, It's true. My own son. The Endelment. I didn't really think it possible. His powers are far more fearsome than I had thought." He then stood himself casually as he smiled and continued, "Exactly as I had hoped." I settled my powers from trying to crush everything around me as my right eyebrow raised slightly, which Father reacted to and yelled, "You really are him! The legendary Endelment! Now who's insane, Rayakin?" With no care to the man's words, I said, "Clearly you, for thinking you can still defeat me." Father laughed at that, then said, "Too bad for you, I can. I trained day in and day out, just so that I could send you straight to Abyss. I waited for the day one of my sons would become the legend. And what luck it had to be the very child I hate. You were always walking around wanting nothing more than to bring down my empire. But I couldn't do anything. Maria admired you so much it sickened me. But I couldn't get rid of you even after her death because of Salus. I had no choice but to let you live to care for him." Just then, Wolf stood up in her half state, facing Father yet speaking to me as she asked, "My lord, what now?" "Leave, Wolf," I said. "Take everyone else and just walk away." "No, I'm not leaving you." "Same here," Serena said. "I'm not about to lose you over this jackass." "Best do as he says," Baraku said. I glanced over to my left side to see the Heroica walk over and stand just a few feet from me as he turned to face Father, and he continued, "Otherwise, you might not survive this." As I looked back at Father, he laughed at the fact that Baraku now stood against him, then yelled, "Like I said, it doesn't matter how many friends you have, you're all still weak compared to me. There's nothing you can do." "Don't be so sure about that, Halen," a familiar voice said. Surprised at who it was, I looked over to my right to see Koju walk over and stand next to my right side as he too faced Father. With a cocky smile, the wolf god said, "You may have what it takes to best just one of us on your own. But what makes you think you can take on the baddest of the bad all at once? All by yourself?" Dominic grew angry at the god and he growled a bit, then yelled, "I'll make you eat those words, mongrel." Koju laughed, then said, "We'll see about that." In that moment, both Koju and Baraku gave a signature howl that echoed throughout the city. Shortly after that, Molten lava burst out from underneath each of them and engulfed both wolves. However, lava retreated back into Earth, revealing two powerful canines that stood at my sides, each viciously ready to strike. Though Baraku did what Koju had done, his transformation was a bit different. In fact, all that really happened was that his fur started to glow slightly as the bracelets around his ankles became clamps from broken chain shackles. However, something else was different. Each scar the Hiroga had somehow reopened and was dripping blood, while his right eye was open and shining even brighter than it had before, practically flaring. Finally, with the wolves having changed into their true forms, their voices echoed as they spoke. In his new form, Baraku said, "This time, minion, you're going down." Koju laughed again, then said,
If I were you, I'd think twice about messing with us.
Father just glanced between the two wolves and calmly said, "I only have to think once." He then moved into his fighting stance as he said, "Seeing as how you're still no match for me." I raised my right hand a bit and snapped my fingers to call Rakar and Rokar over to me, grabbing Rakar with my left hand to hold it backhanded, while grabbing Rokar with my right to hold it forward. As requested, I transferred Cervric's soul into Rakar and changed it into its bowblade form, while I bent my left hand down to hold the weapon behind my back. At the same time, I transferred Wardrick's soul into Rokar, also forming its bowblade state, placing part of the hilt over my right shoulder to have the rest of the weapon pass by behind my neck. While I held the apocalyptic blades, they started to have their own aura flare off of them like smoke. I waited for my other allies to step away from the fight, then leaned my head back slightly to look down at Father and asked, "You still think that you're stronger than us, Father?" He gave a light smile as I chuckled at that thought, then continued, "I wouldn't be so sure of that." This concludes the reading of Chapter 45. Thank you all for watching and listening. If you like what you've seen and heard, there will be a link to my physical works in the description below. That being said, stay safe, take care, and we'll see you again next week reading Chapter 46.